Alrighty guys, what's going on? I am Blue, as most of you probably already know, and welcome to our patch notes overview show. I've done this before. It's sort of an informal setting, twice before actually. This is something I'm hopefully going to do from now on most major balance changes, or balance patches rather. Format's going to be exactly the same as it is now. Me sitting here on webcam, the patch notes sitting over here to my what is my left to me, what is to my right on the screen. In all intents and purposes, it is a read-through of the patch notes. But for things I feel confident on articulating as to the future of this class based on the balance changes, I'll obviously be explaining that to you guys based on my own opinions and some of the things I saw in map chat and on the forums and whatnot today. I'll be discussing that. But there are some classes which I do not feel comfortable discussing, so I'm sort of just going to read through those. The two mainly, those of which mainly being Necromancer and Mesmer. I'm reading through those, and I may go over a couple things for Mesmer, but Necromancer, I really don't know a lot about it beyond the maybe one or two builds I've seen in competitive play, so there's not a lot for me to articulate upon that. However, considering this is a live show, at any given point in time, me going over the things I'm going over, you may feel free to ask questions or articulate your own opinions, and assuming it's not a troll, I will read over that live on the show, and we can discuss it between the chat and the viewer here as well. So yeah, guys, let's get it started. Let me open up my chat, have it available for questions in case, and bring this bar down a little bit. Alright guys, so we're going to start it off obviously at the top of the list here, I believe. It's actually, yeah, there we go. Right here for Elementalist here. Just going to go right down the list, starting directly off. Arcane Wave affects 5 targets, doesn't really affect SPVP that much. Signet of Air, that now being a stun breaker. What does that mean? It's interesting, to say the least, because it's somewhat of a weird skill, in my opinion, to put a stun breaker on. The skill in itself, all it does is blind and gives you a passive movement speed increase, 25%. But with it now being a stun breaker, we may see more Elementalists run it, we may not see more Elementalists run it. The question is that 25% worth it? I believe the same question was sort of asked when the Ranger got one of their signets changed to a 25% speed buff as well. So it's really going to come down to that. However, something that may push a lot of Elementalists towards it, in my opinion, is the fact that now moving on to the next thing here, Lightning Flash is no longer a stun breaker. And with the addition of the fact that Lightning Flash can't be used, especially on Kylo, to get up to those higher points and jump through walls and whatnot, like it could be used before, I think we may start seeing a little bit more of the Signet of Air compared to what we didn't see of it before. So that's that on that. And again, the Lightning Flash change, it's no longer a stun breaker. They increased the damage by 50%, but its cooldown was reduced. So we may see it for mobility purposes, we may see it for in-fight purposes, but with it not being a stun breaker, it really has hurt its general usability in that SPVP setting. Cleansing Fire as well is no longer a stun breaker. That was used very rarely as is, so the question is now, are people still going to take it? It does have its cooldown reduced. It is a pretty decent condition cleanse in my opinion, but so that's still to be told. I'd like to see that one play out before I make a comment on it. Glyph of Elemental, this is another one that was weird in my opinion for it being a stun breaker. Because what it does is when you pop that, it gives your skills a chance to proc conditions, I believe, when you activate it, and I could be calling that completely wrong. But that's, again, a very weird skill, in my opinion, to put a stun breaker on, so I think we're going to have to wait for that on that one to see if it's used a little bit more. Moving on once more here, taking a look, let's see. Gust, that now can affect multiple foes in a line. That's pretty good. That's pretty decent buff for the staff. It affects World v. World as well, I believe. And just in general, we may see more of that in staff. And then down here, going down this list now for the next 10 to 15 skills here, looking at all of these here that I'm highlighting now. All of these are aftercast reductions for, and I'm again pretty sure that everything I just highlighted, with the exception of Tornado there, is a reduction to aftercast for staff. So staff, and for those of you who don't know what aftercast is, it is the time it takes after your skill has been cast to be able to cast another skill. So what the reduction all these aftercasts has done, especially for staff now, is it's going to improve the general weapon responsiveness and possibly make it a little bit more viable, a little bit easier to use in the SPVP setting, which, so again, we may see it, we may not see it, that is yet to be seen. Tornado cooldown reduced to 150 seconds, that's going to help out offensive point Elementalists a lot. In terms of balance change, I don't think it's that ground-shattering of a change, so not really much to be said there. Phoenix doubled the velocity. An unblockable skill effect has been added. I'm not sure if it was unblockable before, but that will obviously help it if it wasn't in there before. And the fact that its velocity has been doubled only helps it as well. H-Man, I believe, quoted in the chat that this is fucking awesome. So obviously that's good. Meteor Shower. This is a bit of a confusing one to read off. So increase the size of the area that the meteor strikes. This ability has been optimized. As a result, no functionality has been changed, but the amount of meteor effects has been reduced. Previously, extra meteor effects that didn't actually do any damage would play. We now only display the meteors that deal damage on impact. So reading off of that, basically what has happened is you're going to see less of those meteors actually come down now, but apparently there was a bit, I guess, an animation glitch with it or something before, to where, and this is just me assuming off the patch notes, of course, to where there would be meteors coming down, but they wouldn't actually do anything. They were just there for like, viewing effect. Now they've gotten rid of all of those, and in addition, they've also increased the size of which they'll deal damage in. So that's going to help it out. No overall change for it, though. It's more of just a visual change. So you're not really going to see much of an actual damage increase or damage decrease there because of changes made to Meteor Shower. And then the rest of these are underwater, so we don't really need to worry about it. So Elementalist traits I'm not too keen on. So we're just going to read through these real quick. I don't want to make opinions that I'm going to regret, but I may just make them anyway. Arcane Lightning. This trait now grants a non-stacking 10% bonus to critical damage for 15 seconds after using an Arcane utility skill. Grounded. This trait has been merged with Tempest Defense. And Tempest Defense, a new trait. Reduce the internal cooldown from 90 seconds to 60 seconds. Damage to stunned and knockdown enemies is increased by 20%. And a new Grandmaster trait, which I believe was replaced when Grounded was merged with Tempest Defense. Fresh Air. Critical strikes will now recharge Air Attunement. This effect can only occur once every 5 seconds. I'll make a statement on that. So for Scepter Dagger Elementalists that run offensive builds, that's going to be very good, obviously. Because a lot of the time when you're just chaining damage, not really using any more of your active skills, you're going to be in Air Attunement, chaining that one skill. So being able to, if you get a critical hit in another attunement, swap really quickly back into that to once again deal damage, have access to the 2 and 3, which 2 has, with its very short cooldown, can do a lot of damage. Having direct access to get back into that is only going to be a lot better. So that's a pretty good new Grandmaster trait for Elementals. Will we see them go 30 points into Airmaster to get it? That's yet to be seen. Arcane, Windborne Dagger, movement speed in combat increased by 15% for wielding a main hand dagger, 10% for an offhand dagger, with a 25% total for both. So if you're running dagger, and you're taking that trait, you're going to get 25% increased movement speed, whereas if you're running with main hand, it'll only be 50%, or if you're running offhand, it'll only be 10%. A bit of somewhat of a weird shift, but it's, I mean, sensible, to say the least. Nothing ground-shattering there. Anyway, moving on to Earth. Obsidian Focus increased toughness while channeling from 170 at level 80 to 300 at level 80. Saltstone. This trait has been merged with Stone Splinters. Stone Splinters, which is I think is actually, yeah, this is a trait which has existed, but Saltstone was merged with it. This trait has been moved to the Adept tier and now deals 5% bonus damage to bleeding opponents and increases outgoing bleeding duration by 20%. That's a pretty good, pretty decent trait. Rock Salt. This trait's moved into the Master tier to compensate for the fact that Stone Splinters was moved into the Adept tier. So Stone Splinters and Rock Solid swapped out. And then the new Grandmaster trait, Diamond Skin in Earth. 10% of total toughness is outconverted into condition damage. A lot of other classes already had this, so there's not a lot of surprise that they threw it in there for Elementalists as well. Fire, I've been told that by a couple people that this doesn't really change much. Fire is still not very good for SPVP. We're going to read it over anyway, obviously. Lava Tomb, this trait's internal cooldown has been reduced to 10 seconds. Damage from Lava Fauna is increased by 33%. Damage dealt while in the downstate is increased by 33%. That's downstate damage. I don't know why you would spec for that, in all honesty. And then Persisting Flame updated this trait to allow blast finishers to give Fury 10 seconds as well as Might. So the fact that let me see here. The fact that it increases damage from Lava Fauna by 30% may help staff users a little bit, but overall, again, a little weird. I still don't see a lot of people going into fire. Anyway, Water, which is the last thing on Elementalist here. Bountiful Power, damage increase per boon on the Elementalist has been reduced from 2% to 1%. So, bit of a nerf there, but yeah. And then now we're going to move into Engineer, but real quick, did anyone have any questions about the stuff I just went over with Elementalist before I move on into Engineer now? Real quick, I'll give you guys about like 20 seconds to respond here. Anything at all? Anything? Guess no, maybe so. I got the chat right in front of you guys. No? Alright, guys, so with that being said now, we're going to move on into Engineer. Taking a look at their stuff now. Jump shot, increase the radius of the second attack from 120 units to 240 units, and it decreased the aftercast and the skills so that other skills can chain off of it more easily. And also cleaned up the movement on this skill so it will more accurately move to the target location. So let me explain a little bit for those of you that don't play Engineer. Previous to this, jump shot was incredibly buggy, like horribly buggy to the point where you couldn't rely on it in any sort of scenario. Now, I'm not sure if they improved the responsiveness of this skill, but the last time I was playing Engineer and using this skill, it was very just weird trying to use this skill. So, will we see it more now? Maybe, maybe not. In general, I don't think it's going to affect rifle viability, though. Toolkit. Smack and Whack now apply 2 stacks of vulnerability instead of 1 stack. It's good, obviously. Rocket Boots. This was interesting, actually. I saw this on Teldo, so I think we're going to see a pretty big increase in engineer movement speed in general, moving around maps and whatnot because of this. And I was watching Teldo stream, and I looked at this patch and was like, oh, that looks cool. But I did not expect at all that Rocket Boots would jump you this far. It doesn't say it on these patch notes, but this thing shoots you really far. The trait now, so let me read it, obviously. The trait now shoots the player forward and doesn't inhibit the player. Previously to this, what it would do is it would knock you backwards, and you'd be like down on the floor for like a second and a half. Now it just shoots you directly forwards and you can keep on rolling. I'm pretty sure it shoots you something between like 1,500 to 2,000 of whatever the movement thing is in this game. So that's a lot. And first of all, you can move around the map pretty quickly with that. And B, you can get out of fights pretty easily with that too, if you know how to use it correctly. And obviously Teldo will, so I think he actually might start running this now. The cooldown's been reduced to 20 seconds. Again, only helps it even more. But at the same time, at the same time, the trait is no longer a stun breaker. Rumble, this ability now breaks stuns, added 1 second of stability. I'm trying to see which skill Rumble was here real quick. Let me take a look-see here. Put it into the wiki search. I don't actually remember what Rumble was. Let me take a look. Releases a shockwave of inertial first. Oh, okay. So this is weird. So it breaks stuns now. The thing is, though, and they reduced the cooldown. I think they did that in the past. So it's on a 45-second cooldown now. Before it was on a 90-second cooldown, but that, I think, was changed in a previous patch. And now, in addition to it being a blast finisher and it dealing a somewhat decent amount of damage, it also breaks stun and gives you a second of stability. So Thumper Turret. Will it be good? Again, that's yet to be seen. That's a pretty good buff to the Thumper Turret. I think they're trying to push turrets slowly into viability here, but they may not be ready for that yet, in my opinion, which is why we aren't really seeing massive buffs to turret, just because it's somewhat of an awkward mechanic to get to work in PvP, in my opinion, which is why I think they're slowly buffing it. This could be the first sign of that here, but again, I could be completely wrong on that. Moving on. Static Shield. The Static Shield buff is now removed if the player cancels the skill. That we obviously expected, so that was a bug fix. The buff is no longer removed when the player blocks a melee attack. The stun duration has been reduced from 2 seconds to 1 second. So a bit of a nerf there, nothing major, but in my opinion, but a nerf nonetheless. Throw shield. Projectiles from the skill no longer passes through walls. So you can't ninja interrupt people when you can't actually see them now. LOS does come into play correctly here now. Blowtorch. Reduce the aftercast, and again, another aftercast reduction there. Fix an issue that allowed engineers to execute back-to-back heals by using the underwater transition. Again, bug fix, exploit fix, actually. Elixir X, reduced the cooldown to 105 seconds. Elixir X, though, is still somewhat iffy, in my opinion. This is the thing that I never liked about Engineer, is the randomness of the class, especially with Elixir X, and I think Elixir, there was another Elixir, I think one of the Elixirs that would give you, I think it was Elixir U, which also had its cooldown reduced. Just the randomness of it was something where I didn't want to spec it relying on me getting one thing and then not get that thing. So that was something that I don't think a lot of engineers like that, which is why it's still more than likely, in my opinion, will not be used despite its cooldown being reduced to 105 seconds now. But again, we could have a pretty creative engineer out there that could use that to his advantage and utilize the build properly. Elixir U, which is the quickness elixir, also has had its cooldown reduced, but again, because of the randomness of it, I wouldn't use it. And quickness in general in Engineer isn't really that good of a thing anyway. Ice Mortar has randomly on the Mortar Elite had its cooldown reduced. So again, I think they're sort of trying to push the other Engineer Elites into viability, because at the moment they're really not viable in competitive play. Something like it's really your only option unless you're a madman. But again, there's a very small buff such as this is not going to push it into viability. Let's see here now. Launch personal battering ram recharge has been reduced, and the personal battering ram itself has also had its recharge reduced. So for those of you that don't know, the launch gives a cripple effect, I believe, and then the battering ram itself is a knockback. So, and it does a pretty decent amount of damage too if you're spec with a berserker amulet. So fun. Might see it a little more, but again, a pretty standard buff here, nothing too crazy. Analyze, which I believe is it's 10 stacks of vulnerability before, which I think was on 40 second cooldown previously, is now on a 30 second cooldown. So you may see it more. Throw napalm, increase the duration of the burn to 5 seconds. Very good. And then we have, let's see here. And we actually are seeing some buffs to the turret stuff here. I actually haven't looked at this part of the trait changes yet, or the buff changes for engineer yet. Let's see here. Harpoon turret, that's nothing to worry about. Surprise shot from the rifle turret has had its damage increased by 33%. It's a pretty good amount, and it did pretty decent amount of damage before. Before you could run rifle turret, there was a build, I believe, Airhove. If anybody remembers who that was, he was on AC back in the day. Would run this thing where he would run rifle turret but not actually ever throw the turret down. He would only use the tool belt skill because of the damage per second compared to the risk of actually throwing down the turret itself to get the damage. Just wasn't really worth it in his opinion. So the fact that this has only been buffed only is going to help that more. The build was sort of good, but it sort of went away after like a month, so I don't see it coming back. But again, only reiterating that now is again another option possibly. Looking at it again, Rocket from the tool belt as well. The status cooldown reduced, which was, I believe, just damage. I don't think it's actually a, yeah, but, and let me see here. Actually, we did have some viewer questions. I apologize. What class did I go over already? And I did not go over Warrior, going directly down the list of traits. So, I did Elementalist already. We're on Engineer right now. And now let's take a look. See here. Elixir U. The ability now functions correctly with potent elixirs. So, bug fix. Elixir R. The skill is no longer a stun breaker, but the cooldown has been reduced to 30 seconds. Now, this is going to be very interesting, in my opinion. Extremely interesting. Because Elixir R, and again, let me just make sure I'm not entirely wrong, because I tend to get Elixir names wrong pretty often. Let me just make sure I'm not stupid. Yes, okay. I'm not stupid, and it was assuming the correct Elixir. So now Elixir R, for those of you that aren't aware, in TPVP, Elixir R has been an amazing res utility, the toss for it at least. But a lot of people would only take it because it was a stun breaker. The fact that it removes a condition, and let me just triple check here. Yeah, the fact that it only... Recover from stun, refill your... Oh, they did... I'm missing all these changes from previous patches, and I apologize for that. So according to the wiki, it says it recovers you from stun and refills your endurance. It obviously has been updated, so it's only going to refill your endurance now, the Elixir R. It doesn't even remove the condition anymore. So the question is, are people still going to take it, considering the fact that it doesn't break stuns? It's a very good res utility, don't get me wrong, and that, I believe, has not been nerfed. But the fact that it's no longer a stun breaker is definitely going to detriment its viability. So will we see engineers going for another elixir or another utility? Possibly. I think actually already we saw Teldo today on his stream change it out for rocket boots. So that's that. Looking at it now, let's see, super speed, which I think was the oil slick or slick shoes tool belt, if I'm remembering correctly. That also breaks stuns, which that's again really buffing engineer escape capability here. Very interesting choices to change up here in my opinion. Slick shoes, the effect for this skill now actually displays. So this was something when the build was somewhat popular. A lot of people, when the build evolving Slick Shoes was somewhat popular, was the fact that your enemy team couldn't see the effect of this. So you would pop it, and then no one would know what's going on. They're just getting tripped up all over like down and over again. Because this skill, what it does is when you pop it, anyone you run across or anyone that goes behind you will get knocked down for, I believe, 2 seconds is the duration. So the fact that it's skill now displays again may bring it into viability, considering the fact that it's the apologies. Considering the fact that the actual tool belt skill for it is a Sunbreaker now, and that increases your speed amazingly. So it's a pretty good escape utility as well. And considering the fact the utility itself is very good too. So yeah. Grenade kit. The kit no longer destroys itself after 6 minutes after being equipped. Nobody runs a grenade kit for the 6 minutes in one at the same time interval in SPVP, so that only affects PvE. And then net turret fixed an issue where spamming net turret would allow it to fire the electrified net 3 times in a row. Again, bug fix, exploit fix, nothing big there. Traits here. Let's take a look if I can try to comment on some of this, because again, I'm not the most. I know ability's pretty good, but I'm not good with traits for engineer. Acidic coating, this trait now applies blind instead of poison to the target for 3 seconds, 10-second recharge. So, backpack regenerator, this trait has been reworded so that it doesn't imply it adds a regeneration boon. It now scales with healing power from 125 to 192, 1500 healing power. Okay. Explosives, acidic elixirs, this trait now removes a boon when they land, in addition to dealing damage. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. So what this skill did previously, obviously it just did damage, as the traits, as the patch notes are indicating. But now it also has the ability for a boon cleanse, or a boon rip, rather. Boon peel, whatever lingo you want to use for it. So that's a very interesting change, to say the least there. And I do think we may see it possibly again with Elixir B or something like that, to be used on down bodies or something like that against Guardians, but it's again, a lot of these things need to come into play. I'm just exercising the possibilities right now. Auto defense bomb disappear. The internal cooldown of this trait has been reduced to 30 seconds. I'm not actually sure what that trait did previously. Let me just take a doodler here on the wiki real quick. And again, guys, at any point, I do have the chat open here. Let me see. Drop a smoke bomb whenever you are disabled. This skill can trigger only once every 30 seconds. So I think it was 60 seconds before. I am remembering this trait now. But it's sort of like okay. A lot of the other ones for other classes involve, for instance, Thief. Thief sort of has a skill similar to this, to where when they get hit by similar effects that this trait is detailing, where they jump away. And then, as well, Ranger has one to where he'll go into stealth for a couple seconds. But Engineer version of this trait is definitely the weakest in my opinion, so I don't think we'll start to see it come into play despite this cooldown reduction. Firearms, Knee Shot has been merged with Sitting Duck. Sitting Duck, as it has been merged with Knee Shot. Inflicting Immobilize on an enemy also cripples them for 5 seconds, and now applies 5 stacks of vulnerability for 8 seconds. That's only increasing its potency there. It's only really going to be good for rifle builds, in my opinion. We could see it on pistol builds, but generally this is something that rifle builds tended to favor when I was playing Engineer. This effect can only occur once every 5 seconds. And by the way, you're welcome, Vanyan. Fireforge Trigger, this trait's moved to the Adept tier. Juggernaut, this trait's moved into the Master tier. A lot of coding up here. Coated Bullets has also been moved into the Master tier. Napalm Specialist, this trait has been moved to the Grand Master tier. The duration of burns that the player applies has been increased by 33%. And a new Grand Master trait. Modified Ammunition. Damage is increased by 2% per condition on the target when wielding a pistol or rifle. So that, interesting to say the least, because what this could do is this could help to set up bomb engineers and grenade engineers here as well for this new Grandmaster trait. It's amazing, really, if you think about it, because if they're able to chain, especially against someone like a Thief, where they're pretty susceptible to condition damage alone, with all these conditions being thrown on them from grenades, bombs, and so on, it's only going to hurt them that much more, because for every single condition they have on them, their damage is going to be increased by another 2%. So it's actually, I actually agree with the addition of this trait. It's really going to help out engineers in terms of their offensive capabilities, even when running more defensive builds. So a pretty nice buff there. Invention, Stabilized Armor, reduce the damage by 20% when the player is knocked down or stunned. And Elite Supplies, this trait now improves mortar range. So mortar still very iffy for PvP, SPVP. Tools, always prepared. This trait now only drops bandages when the engineer is down. 10-second cooldowns. Damage is down. Damage while down is increased by 25%. That's an interesting thing there. Damage while down is increased by 25%. I don't believe another class has access to that sort of trait. That's a pretty interesting thing. Could be used to improve engineer survivability on a far point, on a back point, or even in middle if they're bunkering middle, which is an extremely unlikely scenario, but in general it's a pretty interesting trait nonetheless. Packed Stimulants. This trait now improves the effectiveness of thrown medkit by 25%. Will we see more medkit? Maybe because of this. Scope. Critical chance is increased by 10% when the distance to the target is greater than 600. Leg mods. The duration of crippled, chilled, and immobilized has been reduced by 33%. Obviously, defensive capability going on there. Armor mods. This trait will now grant Aegis for 5 seconds when critically hit. This has a 25-second incredible cooldown. Okay, so blocking one attack every 25 seconds is sort of iffy, to say the least. I wouldn't agree with taking that trait, so I don't see that being used a lot. And what the flute, I can do that. The issue with that is that's a lot of micromanaging between characters, because I'm trying to go over all 8 classes here, and I only have 5 character slots, so it's a little tricky to do. But actually, that's a pretty good suggestion, so I can't do it now, but I will think about that for the next time there is a balance patch. Thank you for that suggestion, though. And now moving on here, we have Inertial Converter. This trait now functions with the underwater versions, and then the underwater, no one cares about that. Alright, and now moving on to Guardian. I don't know a lot about Guardian. I'm just going to be completely honest with you, so I'm only articulating on things that I know. Guardian, Orb of Wrath. Orb of Wrath, increase the projectile speed of this skill by 30%. Now, Guardians were begging for this for months. I think ever since the game came out, really. Because of the fact that the orb just moves like this. It's just, and I think just by spamming your A and D keys or your Q and E keys, if you're using those by default, you could sort of just dodge those, not even having to use your dodge keys. So the fact that the projectile speed has been increased is obviously going to help that a little bit. Wrathful Strike increases the bite duration from 3 to 5 seconds. Signet of Judgment, this ability now breaks stun, increases, and let me, again, because I don't know much about Guardians, I'm going to have to Google all these up a bit here on the wiki, and take a look and make a judgment for myself. Alright, so let's see here. Passive reduces incoming damage, active grants retaliation to nearby allies, and weakens. So that's actually a pretty good spot to throw a condition removal, in my opinion, on Signet of Judgment. Because of the fact that I'm not sure how much damage it reduces base, but the fact now that A, you can pop this and break a stun, and B, when you do pop it, you're not only putting retaliation on all your allies, which is going to hurt people that are trying to burst you down from stun, the fact that it's going to go throw weakness on your enemy is to have a chance for them to deal damage back at themselves now because of the recent buffs to weakness is only going to help that a little more. So that's a pretty solid choice to throw break stun. I think we might see that a little more. Moving on, we have Signet of the Avenger command. This ability now breaks stuns. Shield of the Avenger, rather. So will we see Shield of the Avenger? Probably not. We don't see a lot of the spirit weapons, so I don't see that happening. Chains of Light. This ability now deals a small amount of damage. So Chains of Light, I believe, was the Immobilize 3 on Scepter, or 3 or 2. I can't remember exactly which. But the fact that it deals damage is obviously going to help that out a little bit. Signet of Mercy reduced the cooldown to 150 seconds. Signet of Mercy. What was Signet of Mercy? Let me see here. Reviving nearby ally. Previously, I believe the cooldown was 180 seconds. Still extremely long cast time, 3 3/4 of a second. Will we see it played? Possibly. We could see it played, we could not see it played. The issue is that this cast time is extremely long and can easily be interrupted if he doesn't have enough stability to channel it. And it's taking up a utility slot as well, so could see it, could not see it. Again, there's going to be a lot of experimentation this patch with a lot of different classes because of the recent buffs. And that's exactly what ArenaNet was going for with this patch. They wanted to increase the amount of builds, and they didn't want to nerf builds into the ground and bring some other random build up from the grave. They wanted to increase the amount of builds in general, and obviously that's going to help out with this. Bane Signet reduced the cooldown to 40 seconds. Let me triple check what Bane Signet is. I'm actually going to Google a lot of these Guardian skills because I'm not the most knowledgeable individual when it comes to Guardian. Knock down and damage your foe. So 40 seconds on that now, possibly on an offensive build, but on a defensive build that we usually see a lot in tournaments, no sir. Purifying Blast fixes skill fact, bug fix. Reflection decreases the cast time from 1.3 seconds to 0.5 seconds. Yeah, I'm actually learning a lot of these. This is actually helping me because I'm learning all these skills now. Anyway, refraction, so obviously cast time reduction on that. What is refraction? Let me Control-C that. Go to the wiki. Control-V that. Clicky. Refraction. Creates a bubble that absorbs hostile projectiles and grants retaliation to allies. So that is... Yeah, is that a... Oh, it's a trident skill. Never mind. Tome of Wrath, Smiter's Boon. This trait now applies to the caster as well. Okay. Sanctuary. Fixed an issue where Consecrated Ground was also reducing the cast time of this skill. Bug fix. Virtue Justice. Updated bug fix. Tome of Courage. Rex Spirit. This trait now, and we'll go over those in a second as well. Tome of Courage Pacifism. Day's duration has been increased to 3 seconds, listed in the 2 to 3 seconds listed in the tooltip. Okay, so I'm going to assume based off of that patch notes it was bugged before. It wasn't actually 3 seconds, but now it is 3 seconds. And Tome of Courage, I think, is the defensive one. Let me just triple check. Because again, I'm not the most... Yeah. Okay, so what that's going to do, obviously, is going to allow possibly more viability coming in through Tome of Courage. With the fact that it's now actually a 3-second daze, we may see more Lights of Deliverance, which is the 5 skill in that, which fully heals everyone around you. We may see that more of those getting off and more, oh my god, in games themselves, so obviously that's going to help it out. Now onto the traits, which I don't know anything about Guardian traits, really, with the exception of like the 00, 10, 30, 30 build we always see, and the 00, 30, 30, 10 builds that we always see, so I can't really commentate too much on these trait changes. Pure of Heart, this trait now heals for its base amount, plus 25% benefit from healing power, up from 10%. Radiance, Blind Exposure. Vulnerability caused by this trait has been increased from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. Radiant Fire, this trait now grants a 20% bonus to burning duration, in addition to reducing the torch skill recharge by 20%. Fix the description text to indicate the accurate recharge reduction. Valor, Glacial Heart, this trait now applies 5 seconds chill on a critical hit with a 100% chance activation rate. This effect's recharge has been reduced from 45 seconds to 30 seconds. Mace of Justice, this trait now goes up 250 healing power while wielding a mace. Pretty good. And now, virtues. Shielded Mind. Courage now breaks stun for up to 5 allies when activated instead of just the Guardian. Zeal, Wrathful Spirits. The trait now increases damage dealt by the spirits by 50%. So, I believe, yeah, those are the weapons, I think. So, wow. I actually have been having trouble believing that, because those weapons are annoying as is, and now they're going to buff its damage. So I could be completely wrong on what I said a couple minutes ago, where we still won't see them. We may see them based on this trait change for Zeal, but again, not in a defensive build, maybe in some offensive greatsword builds, but it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out there. Scepter power. This trait has been increased from 5% bonus damage to 10% bonus damage. Again, Scepter, there's a lot of Scepter Guardians out there. Some of the more defensive ones. So if they want to go for a bit of damage, this would definitely help them out, increasing the damage they can deal if they had already taken this trait by 5%. If not, now increasing it by 10%. Zealous Blade. This trait has been merged with Greatsword power and is now labeled as a Tier 2 trait. And a new Tier 3 trait. Kindled Zeal. 10% of the player's power is converted into condition damage. Guardians don't have a lot of condition damage, so in my opinion. Really, I think Burn and maybe I think they have 1 or 2 bleeds. It's really their only condition output, so in my opinion. And that wraps up Guardian. Any questions on Guardian? Please don't ask me questions on Guardian before we move on to Mezmer. We're gonna wait like 10 more seconds. Anything at all. I'll try to answer to my best abilities. No? No? Alright. Alright, moving on to Mezmer then. Taking a look at it now. Mezmer, so there were some very interesting changes. I did look at these previously, but again, traits, I can't comment on really for traits on the Mezmer, but I can go over the abilities, because I do know most of those. Mind Spike, reduce the base damage by 20%. The skill does an additional 50% damage to targets and no boots. So let me explain that. Mind Spike is part of the... If I did my Googling on the wiki correctly, Mind Spike is part of the auto attack chain for the sword on the Mezmer. Previously, what it would do, and what it still does, is it rips a boon off your target. And now, this is a pretty decent thing. The thing is, though, is you don't see a lot of Mezmers using that auto attack, at least in PvP. But what that does now is if you've already ripped all the boons off your target, it's now going to deal 50% additional damage. Mind Stab reduces the aftercast, so aftercast reductions, which is going to improve responsiveness on that weapon. Illusionary Counter, which I believe was a sword offhand. This skill damage has been reduced to 50% of what it was. It now applies 5 stacks of Torment for 8 seconds. And let's talk about Torment real quick, now that we finally had it come up in the patch notes here. So Torment, guys, for those of you that don't know, Torment is a brand new condition they've just brought in, along with, and they did a bit of condition overhaul this patch. They changed vulnerability, weakness, I think. I'm like trying to remember these names. There's too many names in this game. Weakness, correct? Yes, okay. They changed weakness in this patch to where now not only does it affect regular attacks, but critical attacks as well, where it can ricochet off your target and hit you back. In addition to reducing your endurance regeneration. So there's that. So now, in addition, they also added Torment. And what Torment is it's a brand new condition. For those of you that played Guild Wars 1, it's sort of like SS from that. But let me explain, obviously. So basically, the condition's pretty simple, but at the same time extremely complex in how it can be utilized. The condition in itself, basically what it does is, when you're standing still and you have it applied on you, it does 50% of what bleed damage would be. However, if you're moving with the condition on you, it does 150% of what bleed damage would normally be, and it also stacks in intensity as well, which is gonna, so it works like a bleed essentially, but its damage scales either to half of a bleed if you're standing still, or double of what a bleed would be if you're moving. So it's a pretty dynamic condition, to say the least. I'm pretty interested to see how it's played. It can be played pretty funnily, or in pretty comedic ways. That we may see in tournaments, just trying to think of ways now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with that. But anyway, back to Mezmer overview now. And those of you that, Vanya, when you asked a question about Necromancer, I'll go over that when we get to Necromancer, which I think is next.